Hello everyone, good evening. Let's get started with today's session, guys. In today's session, yes, we will start building our first integration in OIC. And before I do that, I'll just take 5 to 10 minutes to explain how you need to use your onboarding email. So all of you, in case you have logged in from your laptop, can you please pull out the onboarding email? And in that onboarding email, first thing that you have is you have OIC instance URL. You have a username and password mentioned in there. So we share two usernames, ugoic.user1, ugoic.approver1. So while we do the integrations track and the PCS, until we do the integrations and VBCS, we would just need ugoic.user1. Okay, so ugoic.user1 is the user that we need to use. Log into OIC instance with that username and the password. And after OIC instance, I have mentioned SFTP login details in that onboarding email. You don't need to use them now. Okay, when we do the file transfer service, in OIC, I'll show you how to connect to that SFTP server. And I'll also talk about how to use that SFTP server in the integration scenarios. Okay, so we don't need to use connect to SFTP server until we do the file transfer service. And after that, in the onboarding email, there would be 3 links, guys. The first link would give you access to one of the link would give you access to the session recordings. You might have probably noticed this by now. Every session we record, and I would upload the session recording to this particular folder as soon as I'm done with the session. Okay. So yes, you would have lifetime access to the session recordings. You won't be able to download them. We will never ever give download access to anyone under any circumstances. Please don't ask for it. The answer would be no. Okay, you would have lifetime access to the session recordings, not 6 months or 1 year, and you won't be able to download it. And when do you find a recording uploaded here? As soon as I'm done with the session recording gets converted and I upload it to this folder. And the moment we upload a session recording to this folder, what Google Drive would do was it would try to process the recording. And first up, it would try to make a 360p version available. So first of all, as soon as I upload the session recording, in the first 30 minutes, Google Drive would process the session recording and it would make a 360p version available. So if you see a video and you see the quality as only 360p available, don't panic and don't ping me in WhatsApp. It's just that Google has made 360p available for now. After a couple of hours, you would be able to see the 720p recording. Okay, that's about the recordings. And you would have access to, and one of the link in that onboarding email will bring you into this 1.1 OIC material folder. Here you would have all the PPTs that you need. So whatever PPTs I'm going to use as part of the sessions, the request response payloads, notification, HTML content. So everything would be available in this folder. Okay, so integrations, VBCS, PCS, and other documents. So here you have the PPT material. And the third link will give you access to the Fusion Cloud instance details. And in this particular Google Drive sheet, we would maintain the Fusion Cloud instance links. There would be a Fusion Cloud instance link followed by the usernames that we could use, and there would be a password. At any point in time, we try to make at least a couple of instances accessible for you so that you have a choice. Just in case one of them is not performing well, you could use the other one. I just got a message that ESCV is down. So I'm going to mark it in red. And once we get an alternate instance from a vendor, I will update it here. Now for OIC instance is a dedicated pod that we have. It is our own instance. And this instance will hold good for 2 months' time. And when the instance is about to change, I'll give you a heads up and we will share the new instance logins once we get it from a vendor. So this is an instance that would stay good for at least a couple of months. And it would change once in a while, once in 2 months. And whenever we get a new instance, we give you a heads up. We also show you how to back up your code, and we would show you how to deploy your code as well to a fresh instance. Whereas when it comes to the Fusion Cloud applications, these are the demo instances that we use from Oracle. These are the SaaS demo instances from Oracle. And these instances keep changing. Now, if you compare the instances, right? So whenever I refer to the Fusion Cloud instance, I would refer to it with these 4 letters. So if you copy this, so if you copy these 2 instance URLs, put them in there, what's the only difference between these 2 links, guys, that you see? Everything would be same. It's just these 4 characters that would change. So when I refer to a Fusion Cloud instance, I will be referring to it with these 4 letters. I would say EPAP or ESCB. Okay, that's point number 1. Point number 2, always whenever you want to practice anything related to ERP Cloud, and if you need an ERP instance, you come into this Google Drive sheet, you pick up the latest instances from here. Also pick up only the instance marked in green. Don't pick up a red one and say that Prasad, it is not working. We know it very well. That's why we have marked it in red. And how do you connect to it? You just have to click on the link. It opens up the instance, and that would take you to a sign-in page. And within a Fusion Cloud application, Oracle would have given, so this is a SaaS demo instance, right? Oracle would have given a finance. Oracle would have given finance, HCM, and SCM implementation users. So if we are doing an integration use case related to financials, we would log in as an implementation user. If it is a SCM related use case, we use SCM. If it is a HCM related use case, we use HCM. For Fin and SCM, we just have one user, guys. For finance and SCM implementation users, we just have one user. But for HCM, you have users. You have users from 1 till 20. For HCM IMPL, we have users from 1 till 20. And one important point is the password is the same for all these users, whether it is finance, HCM, SCM, or any other user. It is going to be this password that you need to use to sign in. Okay, so you need to click on the instance link that launches the sign-in page. And here you need to enter the username and password to sign in. What's the username that we have to use, guys? If it is a finance-related use case, you type in fin_IMBL. And one important point is you would have a read-only access to this sheet, which means you cannot copy the entire cell. Don't copy the entire cell, it doesn't work. Instead, double click on it, select the password, and then copy it. Okay, so don't copy the entire cell. Double click on the cell, copy the content, and do a Control-C and Control-V. That would copy the password. Never ever try to type in the password manually here. There is a chance that you might go wrong. Okay, instead double click on it and copy it. Now, when you try to log in, if an instance is marked in green, and one important point, guys, never ever bookmark the instance URLs. First instance is never going to be EPAT. Tomorrow it could be EPAQ. Day after tomorrow it could be something else. Plain and simple, whenever you want to practice, you come in here, launch the instance, use the username and this password. Don't bookmark the URLs. Okay. Now I copy this password and you try to copy the password and I would try to sign in. When you sign in, this is a happy path, right? So 99% of the cases, if the instance is marked in green, you type in with appropriate username and the password. It was not there right earlier. Yeah. So as you and you copy the password, you should be able to log in. But some cases, in some scenarios, you might not be able to log in as FinIMPL user. What could be the reason, guys? Because somebody would have logged the user. And when does a user gets logged in Fusion Cloud application? If you try to log into application as a specific user with a wrong password for more than 5 times, the user would get logged. Okay, let me show you how that works. If I go ahead and try to sign in as FinIMPL user, I would just put 1 at the end to make it unique, to make it invalid. I'm just trying to log in with a wrong password for more than 4 times, 5 times. And every time you see this authentication failed error. And now when I try to log in with the right password, even with the right password, would I be able to get in now, guys? Yes or no, please? It's not working. Why is it not working? Because somebody has logged this user by trying to log into the instance as that user with a wrong password for more than 5 times. What do you need to do in that case? You have two options. Ping Prasad in WhatsApp and wait for him to respond back. So if you're probably sitting in a different time zone, you need to add the time zone difference as well, right? So what's another option that you have instead of waiting for Prasad to respond back? Since we have other implementation users as well, SCM, HCM users with the same password, if WinIMPL is logged, you can try to log into the application as any implementation user, be it HCM or SCM, with the same password, And once you log in, remember HCM IMPL, I was able to get in because this user is not logged. But can we use HCM implementation user to load in journals, guys, or create AR invoices? Yes or no, please?
No.
No, right?
No.
Because this user would not have the required roles or the data privileges. So what is it that I have to do? So I need to unlock my FinIMPL user. And how do I unlock a user, guys? We need to go into Tools, Security Console, go into Users, and search for FinIMPL here. And you should be able to see that this particular user is logged. How do we unlock it? Go ahead and unlock it. Okay. These are the few things that you need to bear in mind. Now that I have unlocked this user, would I be able to get in as FinIMPL, guys?
Yes.
I should be able to, right? Yeah. So I'm able to get in now. So these are the few things that you bear in mind, guys, when you are using that onboarding email. Now we'll go ahead and get into OIC instance, and we would start building our first integration in OIC. And the first integration that we're going to build would be a REST API. And in this REST API, we are going to start off with a simple use case, guys. Okay, and what should the REST API do? It should take in first name as input, and this first name is a data type string. And in the REST API, we need to prefix hello. And after we prefix hello to the first name, we need to send that back as a response. Okay, so we need to create a REST API which would take in first name as input, and the REST API should prefix hello to it and send it back as a response. So if we receive John as input, or if we trigger the REST API passing in John as input, we should get back hello John in the response. Now, why are we starting off with a simple use case? Because when you build an integration in OIC, guys, there are around 7 to 8 steps that you have to perform. Okay, and we are going to get into a lot of screens. For the very first time. So I'm going to explain all the options in a easy to understand manner, and I'll be going at a slow pace since it is our first integration. And I want you to focus on those options as I explained them in those pages. Plugging in complexity into the integrations, we have a lot of other use cases down the line wherein we worry about it. Okay. Now, what's the first thing that we need to do, guys? Before you create any integration, what is the first step that we have to do? Or even before we create the integration, we need to worry about the connections first. And even before the connections, what else do we need to do, guys? We need to create a project. And remember, we discussed the integration design options on this particular page, right? And I told that we can create integrations from here. And I gave you an overview of this one. Like whenever you come into the screen, first of all, your user will be applied as a filter. And you would be able to see the first 16 integrations here. And if you scroll down, you see the integrations are loaded in multiples of 16 and all that story. And we do have an option to take out this filter, right? And when I take out this filter, what would happen, guys? I would be able to see, remember user 1, I see 283 integrations. The moment I take it off, I see 284. Meaning there is at least one integration that another developer has created. So if you're working in an integration project, And let's say in that integration project, there is only one integration team, which is building all the integrations related to a finance HCM or SCM. Or maybe in an implementation project, let's say your client is implementing only the finance modules, and there's only one integration team which builds the integrations. In such cases, there's no need to go in for projects. You can just go into design and you can build the required integration components here. Okay, that could be the scenario. But what's the other scenario, guys? Let's say you're doing an implementation project for a complex giant, maybe a HSBC or a British Telecom. And what is it that they might want to do? They would be implementing multiple modules in Fusion Cloud, right? They would be implementing multiple modules in Fusion Cloud. They might be implementing HCM. They might be implementing SCM. They might be implementing a financial transfer. And one important point is, another important point is when you create a user in here, when you create a, sorry, and when integration team builds those integrations, right? So first point is you would have different integration teams. Most probably that would be the case. So there would be one team building integrations related to financials, another team builds integration related to HCM, and you would have a separate integration team for SCM and OTM, etc. So in such cases, what would be the requirement, guys? The requirement would be that whatever integrations that finance team creates should not be visible to the HCM team, or a HCM should not be visible to SCM team. So the partition, you need to have an role-based access control. Okay, so you want to have a control in terms of what integration should be visible to whom. It could be by offering. You might want to have partitions by offering, or you might want to have partitions by business unit. It's up to you. But just in case you need logical partitions within OIC instance, and you have a requirement that integrations created by one team should not be visible to the other team, only in such cases, we can go ahead and make use of a concept called projects in OIC Gen 3. Remember this projects, guys? I'm not sure how many of you know this. Which version of OIC instance are we using, guys? What version is this?
V3, we are Gen 3 we are using.
Gen 3 OIC instance is what we are using. I'm not sure how many of you have seen Gen 2 screens. Gen 2 screens generation, OIC generation 2, it has a completely different look and feel. And it doesn't have some of the features that you have in Gen 3. Projects is a Gen 3 feature. Projects is a Gen 3 feature. We don't have this in Gen 2. Okay, so click on projects. We can create a new project for ourselves. Okay, I'm going to create one for your project, sorry, for your batch. And here you can create a new project for yourself. And you can use your initials when you create it. Okay, say for example, if Abhinav Vishnu is creating a project, what is it he's going to use? AV. And if somebody has used it up, what is it that you're going to do? You can say ABV. Okay, use your first name and last name and create a project. Okay, but in real time, what is it that you might probably see? You might see something like a finance implementation or HCM implementation if you are doing it by the projects or by offerings, or it could be a US implementation project and UK implementation project. Just in case you have different integration teams doing a different rollouts. So on what basis a team or the projects would be created, it can vary from client to client. Guys, there are no hard and fast rules. First of all, when exactly the projects would be required? If you need access control. Okay. And I'm going to create one for your project. Sorry, one for your batch. What did we use, guys, when we did the initial session? We did UG
63.
Right? Yeah.
63.
I'm going to create a project with name UG 63. And if you want anybody to be able to edit, view, and monitor the integrations that you're going to put in here, if you want to, so this is like basically opening up the project for everybody. Okay. So if anybody wants to edit, view, or monitor the integrations, then you can take this box. But we usually don't do it, create it. At the moment you create a project, you should be able to see the project showing up here. And within the project, you would be able to see, and one important point, guys, Within the project, how many components do you see, guys? We see integrations, connections, lookups, and libraries. Okay, remember these 4 components, guys. Let me open OIC instance from here, or let me do it from here so that it will be easy for me to do an alt tab and show you a comparison, or give you a comparison. Now, if you go into, if I come into design here, how many components I see, guys? How many options do I see? Integrations, connections, lookups, and libraries, right? So we see 8 options here. We see 8 options here. Out of these 8 options, what are the options that you get to see here within the project? We see integration, connection, lookup, and library. We see 1 and 2, 4 and 5. Events, packages, agents, and adapters. These 4 options are not visible within the projects. So if I have to create an integration which is related to the events, I cannot do it within the project. I would have to definitely come into the integrations tab. I have to do it from here. And if I have to create an integration wherein I need to talk to an on-premise application, if we have to talk to on-prem application, we need an agent. And this is only available in the integrations track. It's not available within a project. Okay, so please note that yes, project, with the help of projects, you can restrict, do the access control. And at the same time, what you need to understand is, at this point in time, not all the options are available here. Agents, events are not available here. Okay, and the concept of packages also is not available here. And we don't need packages in the project here, because when you export it, all the integrations of this project would be exported as a unit. Okay, so we don't need packages as such. Okay, so it's the first point that you need to bear in mind. And when you come in here, first of all, you see UG63 project guys. Okay, and let me go ahead and create a connection from here, first of all. And for this integration use case, what is it that we need, guys? For any integration, before you build the integration use case, what is it that we need to do, guys? We need to create the required connections. We need to create the required connections. Now tell me one thing, guys. Do I need to talk to any application, guys, as part of this REST API? Do I need to talk to Salesforce or ERP Cloud or HCM Cloud, guys? Yes or no?
No.
No.
We don't need to, right? Because we just receive first name, and all I have to do is a little bit of transformation, prefix hello, and send it back. I don't need to talk to Salesforce or a database or any other application for that matter. Okay. Now, what else do we need to do? And after we build this REST API, should client be able to trigger the REST API, guys? Should client be able to trigger the REST API, yes or no? They should be able to, right? Because only then they would be able to pass in a first name and get back a response. So yes, client should be able to trigger the REST API. And we need a starting point for the integration, and that is what we normally call as a trigger connection. So for this integration, we just need one trigger connection. And which adapter do we need to use to create this connection, guys?
REST.
Since I want to build this as a REST API, we would use REST adapter. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to create a connection here. And I would use a REST adapter. And I need to give it a name. So I say UG63 Hello World REST connection. And as you type in name, identifier gets generated automatically. And there is also a role that we need to select. There's also a role that we need to select here. Now this role is quite important, guys. It's quite important that you get the role or you select appropriate role here. There are 3 options for you to choose from. Okay, so you have trigger, invoke, trigger, and invoke. Now you need to understand what exactly these 3 roles mean, first of all. Okay, let me explain that with a integration example. So I'll go to journal import service. I'm going to use this service to explain explain the difference between trigger and invoke. Okay, I don't see an option to save it. Okay, that's fine. So if you look at this integration, first of all, when you look at this integration, this is going to be the fourth integration that we build, guys. So don't get overwhelmed by the complexity of it. Okay, so we're going to build this integration for almost like 4 to 5 hours, and we will talk about each and every step in quite detail. So all we try to do in this integration is, yes, in this integration, we're going to receive journal payload as input into it. From another system, we receive the journal payload. And yes, let's say you receive 100 journal lines here. We need to import those 100 journal lines in Fusion Cloud application. So to import the journal lines in Fusion Cloud application, so the first connection that you have in any integration, the first node or a first connection you have in an integration is called as a trigger connection. The first connection that you have in the integration is a trigger connection. It's a starting point for the integration. And another way to look at the trigger connection is a message is coming into OIC. So when core banking system triggers our integration, when they trigger our integration, they are going to pass in a journal payload as input. So another way to look at the integration is, or the trigger connection is, there is an incoming payload into the integration. There is an incoming payload coming in. So it is an inbound message coming into OIC from outside world. Trigger node is a first node in the integration. And any other connection that you use within the integration is called as an invoke connection. Okay, so only the first connection is called as a trigger. Any other connection that you use in the integration is called as an invoke connection. Now, why do we call it as invoke, guys? Because we are using this connection to invoke something in a different application. So in this integration, if I receive 100 lines here, I am using ERP connection here to invoke the journal import service in ERP Cloud, so that those 100 lines get inserted to interface table. And then I'm using ERP Cloud connection again to invoke ERP integration service. So it could be using ERP connection to invoke a web service in ERP Cloud, or it could be a database connection we use to invoke a procedure, or it can be an FTP connection to do a write file operation there. So it's like you are basically sending a message from integration in OIC to outside world. It's called as an outbound message. And that is what we call as an invoke. Invoke connection, not the first node, and it is an outbound message going out from OIC integration. It is an outbound message going out from OIC integration to the outside world. Okay, so that's about the roles, trigger and invoke. So when you create a connection, if you create the connection with a role as trigger, then you can use this connection to start any integration. And one important point is the connections, lookups, and libraries should be leveraged to the extent possible. Okay, so if you create 100 integrations related to ERP Cloud, how many connections will you create, guys, related with ERP Cloud Adapter? You would create only one connection, and you would use that connection in all the 100 integrations. Okay, so we usually create one connection per system, one connection for ERP Cloud, one connection for Salesforce, one connection with FTP, one connection with DB. That way we do it. And we use that same connection in the integrations, in all the integrations. And the role is going to determine whether you can use this connection as a first node in the integrations or as a subsequent node, whether you can use it as a trigger or you can use it as an invoke. So I'm creating this connection and I'm 100% sure that I want to use this connection only to trigger my REST API that I'm going to build, right? So a role equal to trigger would be appropriate for this. But let's say somebody else is creating this integration. Let's say let's say one of you were creating this journal import service. What is it that you would do is, even before you create the journal import service, you would create the required connections, right? So yes, you would create a trigger connection, and you would also create an invoke connection, ERP cloud connection here. Okay, so before you build this integration, you would create a connection you would create a trigger connection, and you would also create a ERP cloud connection as well. Now, if I create a connection with role as trigger, I can use that connection as a first node. Okay, very simple. And if I create a connection with role as invoke, then I'll be able to use this connection not as a first node, but as a subsequent node in the integration. Okay, no confusion so far, right? Trigger connection first node, invoke means subsequent nodes. Now there is also one more role which says trigger and invoke. Now when would this come handy, guys? Especially when you create connections for generic systems like ERP cloud or HCM cloud or Salesforce or database, we usually use roles called trigger and invoke. Why is this the case, guys? Let's take a scenario and try to understand it. Let's say, for example, okay, let's take one of you as an example. Let's say Jagadish is building this integration. Okay, and he created the trigger connection and he configured it. Now he needs to create a ERP cloud connection. Now tell me one thing, guys. This is for everyone, not only for Jagadish. So he needs to create an ERP cloud connection. So he needs to create an ERP cloud connection, and he picks up Oracle ERP cloud adapter. He gives it a name. And what role should he select for this connection, guys? Because he needs to use the ERP cloud connection here to invoke journal import service. He needs to use the same connection here to invoke ERP integration service. And he also needs to use the same connection here to invoke ERP integration service again, but a different operation. So what role would be sufficient for this particular connection, guys? If I think about a role, invoke would be sufficient, right?
Only invoke.
Yeah,
Yes.
if I think about a role for this connection, only from this integration standpoint, invoke would be sufficient. So let's say Jagadish created this ERP cloud connection. And when he created this ERP cloud connection, let's assume that he has used invoke as a role. Okay, he has created the integration, everything is done. Now, after the integration is done, now it's time for Abhinav to build another integration. And he also needs to build an integration related to ERP cloud. But the use case that he has is he needs to trigger his integration based on a business event happening in ERP cloud. He needs to trigger his integration based on business event happening in ERP cloud. Okay, he needs to create an integration, and his integration should be triggered automatically. I think this was I'm going to delete this just to avoid confusion. I think I'm picking up a wrong one. Okay, that's fine. I'll worry about it later. So you see this, Abhinav needs to create an integration, and what he needs to do is in his integration, or he needs to start his integration or trigger his integration whenever item is updated in cloud. Whenever item is updated in cloud, Abhinav needs to trigger his integration. So what he has to do is Abhinav needs to use ERP cloud connection as a first node in the integration, or he needs to use ERP cloud connection to trigger his integration. Now tell me one thing, guys, if Jagadish has created ERP cloud connection here with a role as invoke, would Abhinav be able to use that connection here, guys?
No, I think.
Only, yeah, if Jagadish creates a connection with a role as invoke, this connection, first of all, will not be visible at all here in the trigger node. Now tell me one thing, guys, can I change the role of the connection after we create it?
No.
Not possible. So this is another important point, guys. You pick a role when you create a connection, and after you create it, you cannot change it. So what does it mean, guys? So yes, Jagadish has created one ERP connection with a role as invoke because he thought about a role only from this service standpoint. And when Abhinav has to create this integration to trigger his integration based on ERP cloud, he has to create another ERP cloud connection. So what does it mean, guys? It means that we end up with two ERP cloud connections. Is it the best practice, guys? Usually, if you follow the best practices, we should have only one connection per system. So what does it mean? So you guys now understood where the trigger and invoke would come handy. Usually when we create connections with a generic systems like ERP cloud, HCM cloud, Salesforce, etc., or database, you would be using the connection. You might be using one connection to trigger some integrations, and you might be using the same connection as an invoke in another integration. So that's the significance of role trigger and invoke. But for this integration that I'm going to build now, I just need to use this connection to trigger my REST API. So I'm going to select the role as trigger. If it is a trigger connection, you can stick to the role as trigger, guys. If it is a generic system connections, then you can always go in for trigger and invoke. Now you might say, Prasad, why can't I go in for trigger and invoke always? You cannot do it because sometimes you might not have the required details. Okay. So yes, if it is a trigger connection that you're creating and you're absolutely sure that you would use that connection only to trigger an integration and you're not going to use it as an invoke in any other case, then stick to it. Create the connection. And after you create a connection, you would be able to see the connection status is configured and it is by default 100%. And there would be something called as a security policy that you get to see here. There would be something called as a security policy that you get to see here. Where exactly would this come into picture, guys? I'm creating this REST trigger connection now, and I'm going to use this connection to create a REST API. When we test that REST API or when we share that endpoint URL of that REST API to a third party calls that REST API, and in that REST API we have this connection as a trigger. So when that REST API or whatever integrations are created, right, with this connection as a trigger, when you trigger those integrations, you need to pass in authentication details in this format. Okay. So what are the options available? Open authorization token 2.0 or basic or either of them. So as part of this integration, I'm going to show you how these two work. For now, I'm going to select this as basic auth. For now, I'm going to select it as basic auth. Or let me do it this way. I'm going to select either of them. So by default, it was OAuth, right? I'm going to change it to OAuth 2.0 or basic auth. And I'm going to revisit this particular security policy after we create the integration. But for now, just bear in mind one single point. Whatever integrations are created with this connection as a trigger, when you trigger those integrations, you should be passing in authentication details either as a basic auth or as open authorization token. What does basic auth means? Meaning you have to pass in OIC username and password when you trigger that integration. So if third party is supposed to trigger your integration, along with that integration endpoint URL to the third party, we should also share the OIC instance username and the password. Some clients might not be happy with it, and that's when OAuth 2.0 would come into picture. Okay, so we'll discuss this in detail when we test the REST API. And this is again a new feature that we are seeing in Gen 3, guys. We didn't have this option in the connections earlier. Now, what this means is, after you build an integration, remember there will be an endpoint URL generated. And when we test that endpoint URL from Postman or from outside of OIC instance, you can control who would be able to trigger the endpoints. So by default, it would say connect to endpoints using internet. So what this means is public gateway means anybody who has that integration endpoint URL, anybody who has that token or the username and password will be able to trigger our integration. Doesn't matter where they are in, because we said public gateway. Anybody across the globe can trigger my integration. But if you want to put in restriction in terms of who can trigger my integration or from which network I can allow the inbound connections, then we can make this as a private endpoint. And what we do is when we create this OIC instance, guys, when we create this OIC instance, to the OIC instance, you can attach a private network. Remember, setting up the private network is something that would be done by OCI administrator, not you and me. And he can set up a private network, and in that private network, he would be writing the rules there. He would mention from which IP ranges or from which network we should allow the request to come and trigger this REST API. So if you have a requirement like, say, we should be able to trigger an integration only when the requests are coming in from within our company network. In such case, what I can do, I can connect to I can create not me, OCI administrator would create a private network, and he would allow inbound connections only from the HSBC internal network. So if any request comes in from outside of a HSBC net, it won't, the request doesn't go through. So that way you can mention who should be from where the request should be allowed to be sent to these integrations. Remember, guys, we didn't have this option in Gen 2. This is a new option that we have got here. Now we can test this. It is 100% now. So when the configuration status is 100%, which means the status is configured, and from this point onwards, and I can save the integration, save the connection. From this point onwards, yes, when the connection status is in configured, which means I can use this connection to build the integration now. So let's create an integration. And you have an option to create an integration from scratch, and you can upload an integration. When exactly this would be helpful, guys, if you want to migrate one integration, migrate an integration from one instance to another one, this would help. And this is a newer option that we are seeing, guys. So what this means is, if you want to copy the integration from another project and move it into this one, you can do so, or you can make a copy of it. Instead of always exporting and importing the integrations, right? We can go ahead and copy the integration from another project and also put it into this one. Okay, now create a new one, and I'm going to create this integration as app-driven, application-driven orchestration, meaning client should be able to, or client should trigger this integration with the help of an endpoint URL. And I'm going to give it a name. I would say hello world REST API. Again, the same story repeats. Spaces would be replaced with underscore. Everything gets converted to caps. That's how the identifier is generated from the name. And remember, guys, after I create the integration, we would be able to change the name, and we will be able to create a new version of it. We can change the keywords and the description, but we won't be able to change the identifier. This acts like a primary key. This acts like a primary key. And within OIC instance, when you create integrations, the integrations get created with a version number as 01.00.40s. There are three parts in the version number, guys. There are three parts in the version number: major, .minor, .patch. So 2 plus 2, 4, plus 4, 8, with 2 dots in between. It is total 10 characters. So versioning is a complex subject in integrations, guys, and we have a separate session scheduled to talk about that. So towards the end of the integrations track, we would spend one whole session talking about migration, versioning, and cloning of integrations in quite detail. Until we do that particular topic, guys, whenever we create an integration, we are going to leave the version number as 01.00.40 by default. Okay. And if I want to make this integration available to other projects, I can tick this one, so that what would happen? Somebody else in a different project would also be able to copy this integration into his project. And I can create it. Now, the moment you create an integration, what is it that you get to see, guys? You get to see that there is a blank screen created, start node, end node. And we need to start building the integration here. So we're going to come back to this one in a moment. So I'm going to save this. First of all, I go back. Remember, we created this project, right? First of all, And we created this project. And within this project, we have created one connection and we have created one integration as well, right? Now, who has access to this particular project base? Who has access to this one at this point?
Only
UG
us. UG.
Only this user.
Only this user, right? The user one. Now let me try to log into OIC instance as a different user, guys. Let me log into the OIC instance as a different user. I'm logging in as approver one. Don't get misleaded by the word approver, guys. Just think of it as logging in as a different user. Okay, I'm logging into the application as a different user here. Now, if I go into projects, by default, my username will be applied as a filter, the user with which I have logged in. And if you go into design integrations, that would be the same case. And what is it that you notice here, guys? How many integrations that I updated, guys? Meaning this user, approver one, there's only one integration. But if the project did not use, or if you have not used projects in a specific implementation, then if the user takes off the filter, this guy is able to see all the 284 integrations that everybody else is building. We don't have any access control here. But what if we go to projects? I take off this filter. I now able to see 50 projects, and I see UG63 is one among them. Can I get into the integration, guys? Can I get into the project?
Looks like yes.
Okay, what does it say, guys? Please read it out. User
Doesn't have a sufficient privilege.
to perform this action. Why is this the case? Because approver one doesn't have, or that this user doesn't have access to this project. Let's go ahead and share it, grant him access. Now, we are the owner of this project, and I can add a people, or I can grant a person monitor access, view access, or edit access. Okay, let's grant them only monitor access and see what happens. What do you think would happen, guys, if I add approver one as a if I grant monitor privilege to approver one on my project? Which of these three tabs do you think this guy will be able to see, guys?
Observable.
Absolutely. Let's see if that works or not. Now that I've given approver one monitor privilege on my project, when this guy gets into a project now, is he able to get in now, guys? First of all, we were not able to do it earlier, right? But we are now able to get into the project. Earlier, we have got a error saying that, sorry, boss, you don't have a privilege. Now we are able to get in. And which of the tabs do we see? Only observe.
Observe.
Meaning I can only see the integrations which are triggered in this particular project, but not the design and deploy option. Now let's increase the privilege. So let's move him from monitor to a view privilege. Now, what do you think this guy will be able to do, guys, with a view privilege? Would he be able to see all of them? What's a guess? He's able to see everything? Yes or no, guys? He's able to see the design, deploy, and observe. And
It's all three.
yeah, he's able to see everything, view everything. But will this user be able to make any changes in the integration as well, guys?
No.
Ideally, he should not be able to, right? Because we have given him view only access. So that is why when I open any integration, I'm able to open them. I can see what's going on, but they will open up in view only mode. What exactly does that mean, guys? Does that it just means that, yeah, I cannot modify it. I only have view only access. Okay, everybody clear so far? Now, what if I want this guy to also be able to edit my integrations as well? I need to grant him edit access. Now, would this guy be able to edit the integration space since I've given him edit privilege? He's able to see the details, and he can also edit the integrations as well. And he can also edit the integrations as well. And yes, you might have multiple team members working in a project, and it could very well be possible that multiple integration developers might try to edit the same integration at the same time. Quite possible, yes or no, guys? I might be editing the integration here. Jamal might not know it, and he might try to open the integration at his end. Possible, yes or no?
Yes.
So assume that it is Prasad editing the integration here from India, and it is Jamal trying to do it from a different location. And at the moment we get into an integration, the moment Prasad gets into an integration, OIC applies a lock on the integration, and you see the integration is in lock state. Yes, Jamal will still be able to get into the integration to see what Prasad is doing, but would Jamal be able to make any changes in the integration, guys? Not really, because it is locked by Prasad here. So when would the log be released, guys? As soon as the user who is editing the integration comes out of it. Now that Prasad is out of the integration, if Jamal sees the integration, it is in unlocked state. So Jamal can now get in and he can make the changes in the integration. Why do we have that locking concept, guys? It just helps us to prevent overriding one another changes. So without our knowledge, I might be doing something on an integration. Somebody else might also open it up and make some more changes, right? So we end up overwriting each other changes. So to avoid that, we have the concept of locking. Now, another important point with locking is, so let's say Prasad is editing this integration. Okay. And when would the log be released, guys? Only when I click on this back button, the log gets released. One important point, guys, when you are within the OIC instance, when you're doing the build, never ever use the back buttons of the browser, guys. Never ever use the back buttons of a browser. Within the integration, you would be within the integration of PCS or VBCS, you would see the back buttons here, use them. If Prasad clicks on this one and comes out of the integration, then the log gets released. But what might happen is, so not every time we cannot be disciplined enough to actually click on this and come out of the integration, only then close the OIC instance, right? So you might have to leave the office immediately. Maybe you had an emergency, and what is it that you might do? You might just click on into mark. Quite possible, yes or no, guys? So would the log be released if we just close the browser abruptly?
No.
What's your guess? The log doesn't get released. So Jamal waits for 2 days, 3 days, 1 week. Would the log be released? It doesn't get released. Now, who can unlock this integration, guys? Now, first of all, if you see here, you see that this integration is locked. Who has logged this integration? Approver 1 has logged it. I think somewhere that information would also be available. Okay. Maybe that information would be available here. So we have an option to unlock it from here. But who can unlock the integration, guys? First of all, you see this integration is in lock state, right? Now, who can unlock this integration? There are 2 users who can unlock it. A person who has applied the lock himself. Yeah, the person who has applied the lock himself, meaning approver 1 itself can log in and unlock it. Or the user who has a service administrator role can also unlock it. Does this user have service administrator role, guys? Yes or no? How do we know?
Yes.
Because
Looking
we
at
see
the
settings.
setting.
Yeah. So we don't need to OCI to see the roles, guys. If you just look at the menu option, if you see settings, we are administrator. So I can go ahead and unlock the integration from here. Okay. So that's how the locking works. Now, what is it that I can do? I can go ahead and build the integration from here on. So we've reached a logical stage, guys. Let's stop here for today. And tomorrow's session, I'll get started with the integration build. We will configure the trigger connection, talk about the mappings, and then we will also test the integration. Any questions, guys, in what we have covered today? Yes, Jamal.
Yeah, hi Prasad. Murali here.
Yes, ma'am. Go on.
Yeah, Prasad actually mentioned that public gateway and private network. In that, let us see, there can be from one service to another service, we might have to invoke sometimes.
Mhm.
So in that case, which option we have to select? In the same setup.
It depends on when you invoke one connection, one integration from another integration, right? We don't get a choice at all. It doesn't tell you. You get to see this option. Okay, so when you create a connection, you get to see the public and private gateway. So I think where you're getting confused is this public and private doesn't mean you cannot it doesn't control whether you can invoke one integration from another integration. So it basically controls from the outside world the traffic that comes into OIC integrations. Should all the traffic be allowed, or should only the traffic from a specific IP ranges be allowed or not? We are not talking about invoking one integration within another integration. That is a different story altogether.
Okay.
Okay, so this is about from the other outside world when the traffic comes in. Should every request be allowed, or should only requests from a specific network be allowed or not? That's a question here. Okay. Yes, Vishal.
Prasad, what connection is required for this specific integration, correct? Because we are not connecting anywhere.
Okay. Okay, let me ask you this thing. Okay, I'm going to create this. I've created this integration. Now tell me how I build it. Do we need a start node or not?
Yes.
And what is it that you're going to use as a start node? What is the first node in an integration?
Trigger.
That's why we need it, right?
Okay.
In an integration, you need at least the first node, and the first node is a trigger. And since we want to build this as a REST API, we created it as a trigger connection. And within the trigger connection, I'm going to determine, I'm going to mention that I want to receive first name as input, and I'm going to mention that I want to send back greeting as a response. So once you understand the, once we build the integration tomorrow, you would get better clarity.
Okay.
Any other
Prasad?
Yeah.
Prasad,
Yeah.
Jamal here. See, whenever we are going to test for REST web services, automatically it will generate some URLs. What is that URLs?
We'll talk about it when we test the integration.
Okay. Because some href something is there. Okay, so like that.
Yeah. Yes, Jagadish.
Yeah, Prasad, see, regarding these projects and packages, you said in the project there is no package. But thing is, see, for example, in the project you have one or two integrations. Okay, and I build an integration which is outside a project. But can I keep these three as a package and move it? Because in a project, I may be having 5, but I don't want to move that 5 into the other instance. So can we do that one like that?
First of all, the integrations in a project cannot be included as a package. Okay. So if something is not possible, it is not possible, as simple as that. So if within a project, so if within an integration, so within the project, if you want to deploy the integrations, you have an option to export it. And when you export it, you would be able to see that all the integrations that you have in that project will be exported and deployed as a whole. Okay, so the concept itself, so whatever you have in the design screen, whatever package you have, so that itself works like a project, right? Because all the integrations would be exported by default. But what you might say, Prasad, I don't want to expose all the integrations or redeploy all the integrations. I want to migrate only one or two of them. So in such case, you would pick only those integrations alone, and you would deploy them to the higher instance. It's very simple here. So in integrations, right?
Okay.
If you go into integrations, earlier there was no option for us to create a partitions, first of all, right? So that's the whole reason why Oracle has given those projects itself. Why did Oracle give projects here? That would help you to group the ERP, FIN, or HCM related packages, integrations into one package. But that's exactly what you're doing with the help of a project here. So the case of using a package within the project is meaningless. Okay. Any other questions, please? Yeah. See you tomorrow, guys. Thank you.